All right, everybody. Good to see you. This is Joey Bag of Loans, and I want to let you know something special about church loans. I specialize in church loans. Somebody said, "Hey, Joey, what loans you got in that bag?" Well, I got church loans. We have cash out refinance. We have rate and term refinance. Say you got screwed on a bad deal and your church is paying 11, 12% interest. We could give you a new rate and term to lower those monthly payments. Thirdly, we have purchases. You could purchase a church. Now, you used to have all kinds of different deals out there, so but the market has tightened up about 18 months ago. So now, whether it's a cash out refinance, a rate and term refinance, or you're going to purchase a church, you're looking at having to have at least 25% equity. So if it's a purchase, you got to put down 25%. If it's a refinance, you got to leave at least 25% equity in that refinance. So say you got 50% of the church paid off, you want to add an extension, you want to build a children's church out, you want to put a playground on the outside for the kids, well, you could take out max another 25% of that if you only have 50% left on that church. So that's exciting. So we're looking at a 75% at least for purchases. The 80% has gone away. No more 20% down, 25%. Now, the loan would be only about 5 to 10 years in length, but don't worry because it's amortized over 25 years, and the interest rates are very reasonable. We're looking at 7.5 to 8.25, that range, which is the same range really for any type of investment loan. So that's a pretty good range. Of course, it was better a couple of years ago when money was being given away for free, but it's not a bad rate. So that's something to consider. Now, churches, because they're nonprofits, they don't need to provide tax returns. So you can just give the financials, a P&L, share what your budget is. And if the membership has been the same or has gone up, then you're pretty solid secured for that loan. And as a pastor or the founder of the church, whatever, nobody on the board of elders or anybody has to put their credit up for a guarantor. Unless the financials look a little bit shaky and the whole budget's not very strong, then we might ask for the pastor or some top board member to put their credit up for a guarantor. But in general, we just do it in the church's name and the corporation's name. You don't have to be a personal guarantor on it, and that's how you do it. We take the profit loss statements. We'll look at your bank statements to see it supports the data that you wrote on the profit loss statement, and you got to have about 6 months savings. If you could prove that you have 6 months principal, interest, tax, and insurance savings, then you get qualified for that loan. So there's a lot of paperwork. It'll take a couple of days for us to get it all filled out, but usually about 48 hours to 72 hours after you submit that paperwork, we'll come back with you. We do some more questions, or we'll let you know if you're going to be at the 7.5 rate or 8.25 or whatever. So we'll let you know if you're pre-approved within 48 to 72 hours. But really, this is a niche program. You know, the Catholics, the Lutherans, the Mormons, they all have their own money. They don't borrow money because they have millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in their organization. But this is really for independent churches, smaller churches, mid-sized churches, or big independent churches. We're doing loans up to $6 million for building projects and so on. So we could really give loans up into the multi millions of dollars for churches. Now, I know that a lot of pastors out there, you struggle with, if you're in the Pentecostal circles or the Dave Ramsey circles, you're used to hearing a lot of preaching and teaching about no debt, no debt, mortgage is demonic, loans are demonic, and all this kind of thing. And so it really forces a mindset for a lot of pastors, especially younger and newer pastors, to feel like it's a sin or something like that. So they have to continue to rent or rent forever, not moving into their own building, not getting their own building, and essentially paying rent in your church is instead of owning your church. So what happens when you're just paying rent in your church, you're literally just burning your money every month. That is worse. To me, that's a bigger sin than to get a mortgage, than to get a loan. So I have to share this because in the Word of Faith and Pentecostal circles, we have not been taught a balanced message. We've just been taught debt free, oh man, nothing but to love Him, like it's one of the Ten Commandments. And we've been afraid to talk about it. Those that even know better are afraid to address it because of the peer pressure in the Word of Faith Pentecostal circles. Well, let me just tell you, uh, the guys in the Word of Faith in the Pentecostal circles, the top guys, got loans. My pastor, one of the top leaders in the Word of Faith movement, Bill Winston, he bought that 33-acre mall, and he was praying for debt free, believing for debt free, because that's what was being preached in that Word of Faith circle. But you know what? God led him to get a loan. And he got a loan for, I think it was like $8 million, 11 or $8 million. He got a loan to buy that mall. And and through faith, he paid that off. I think it might have been, I think we bought that building in 2000, the strip mall. And I think it got paid off. I'm not exactly sure, maybe 2006 or 2007, something like that. But, within 10 years, they paid off that mall. So that's a blessing. But he got a loan to get it. And I'm not going to go on naming more and more pastors, but I know a lot of big, famous, well known pastors, they got a loan to build their churches. And you know it because they have debt burning services when they pay it off. Now there are those who have paid cash, but typically they have paid cash when they're already at the top of the mountain, a mega ministry, multi-million dollar ministry, and they have the ability to do that. But when you're a newer church, you've only been open 5 to 10 years, and you're going to keep paying rent, you're burning that money. Now, I'm not saying you should over leverage yourself because I did an owner financing myself, over leverage myself, and I was paying 16 grand a month for a building that really we couldn't afford as a new church. That was a mistake. But I'm saying if it's within your budget, if you're paying, 25, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month for your rent, and you could be paying that for your own mortgage, owning that land, owning that building, actually being a bad steward, not being a good steward by just paying rent. So if you could get out of a rent situation and get a mortgage that you church could really afford, and that listen, no one's going to loan you any money that you can't afford anyways. I mean, typically when you go into a bank like the one that I use, they're gonna make sure you have a good profit margin. They're gonna make sure that it's not maxing out your businesses, your churches income to debt ratio, expense ratio, so on. So no one's gonna, just borrow you millions of dollars and screw you. You're in a bunch of debt and your church is in trouble now. I got in a situation like that because I did an owner finance and they were just trying to get rid of that building because they couldn't afford it. So I said I'll take it over by faith, and then it was just a bad mistake. It was too much uh, to bite, in which I couldn't chew. But I was, just believing by faith and believing in faith, and so there has to be a level of practicality. So I'm speaking to pastors now that you are practical. You're not, in a hyper faith, bitten by the hyper faith mosquito, and you're going to really see what your church's payments are, what your income is, and you're going to make a decision to say, hey, wait a minute, let's stop burning that money. Let's secure our own location. And if I could give any advice on this little stream podcast, whatever, I would say if you're going to buy a church, it's better to buy a church that doesn't look like a church. Because if you're going to move or sell that building, it's very hard to sell a building that is a church. But if it looks more like a convention center, a conference area, a business type meeting space that could be used for other companies, it's going to be easier to turn, easier to sell. So that's something you want to keep in mind when you're wanting to buy a church. If I buy a church again, right now we're renting a space. We're starting up services very soon in this space. Eh, You know, but if I was going to buy a church, it's something like that. It would be something that looked corporate. Like my pastor Bill Winston, his church is in a movie theater. They gutted the movie theater, built a sanctuary, but that hall could be used for theater, plays, concerts. It doesn't look like a church. So the resell ability is very high. And America's landlord, Sam something, I forgot his last name, Sam something, call him America's landlord from Chicago. He said that the most important advice he could give in buying real estate is resaleability. You want to be able to move it quickly, liquidate quickly. So the same thing, if you're going to buy a church space, you want to buy a space that could be easily sold, easily turned over to a business. Because if you're going to sell to only churches, then you're limited to just churches buying that building. And of course, if it's a steeple with a cross on it and the traditional look, you're getting into that situation. Now, if you're really hard as set on the church building and you want that aesthetic, then God bless you, go for it. I could get you the money. We are basically brokering the loan from the number one church financier source in America. And we're doing in every state, DC, New York. We're not limited. If you want to buy your church, we can get you the money. Get you 25% down, contact me, and we'll get the ball rolling. And we'll get your congregation in that church so you stop wasting money on rent. Remember, God has promised you to give you the land. That's the first covenant promise he gave to Abraham and his descendants, and you are a descendant of Abraham. Nothing is wrong spiritually or scripturally with debt when it's debt that's providing you a benefit, when it's leveraged, when it's bringing blessing, finances. I have a mortgage, $1,600 in Oklahoma, and that same house is rented out at $3,300. So that's a profit of 13 or 1,200, whatever dollars, over $1,000 profit on that debt. So I'm using that debt, leveraging it out, renting it, and bringing in cash flow. That's not a sin. That's called wisdom. And so, in the hyper faith, areas, some people have not really understood this and misunderstood this because it's not been preached with the real balance. But if you add faith with wisdom, much like the general in the faith, Frederick Casey Price talked about in his book Faith, Foolishness, and Presumption, classic faith book. That book really puts you back in the middle of the road. As Brother Hagan used to say, if you go too far on the right, you get it in a ditch, or too far on the left, you're getting a ditch. We're saying have faith, believe in God. God can do all things, but also use wisdom, and God will lead you and guide you to a wealthy place. So just wanted to share these things with everybody today. Contact me if you want to get out of renting and purchase that church. God bless. Joseph Castillo, Joey Bagalones, Bishop Joey.